with Doctor Who and the Hand of Fear. I've approached this one with some amount of dread, and that it still gets to me, especially now since Elizabeth Sladen is no longer with us. But I still remember when I sat through this the first time, and she'll come back. He'll go get her, you know. He didn't come back until David Tennant was Doctor, and that's actually a powerful scene when she meets up with him, and she says, "You know, I waited for you." He's got this guilt-ridden look on his face, but maybe I can find some moments here, especially in this episode, that could give some explanation for the Doctor's actions. I mean, in a lot of ways, it's blatantly obvious in the course of the story at the end here, but yeah. So this is another one where you could make up stories for Big Finish or novels or what have you of other adventures that happen between them before you get here. But basically, the TARDIS arrives in this site where there some exploratory explosives are going on to move Earth, and, you know, I guess for oil drilling or what have you, or something like that. But before we get there, we get a little preview of something that happened on an alien world millions of years ago. And somebody was executed, and in the attempt of executing this apparent criminal or traitor or what have you named Eldrad, the guy carrying out the order warned that it wouldn't be complete, and they said, "We have no choice, you have to do it," and he does, and the planet they're on is being just devastated. It's freezing to death, basically, and one of the guys seems to either expire or nearly expire, fall into unconsciousness and whatever, and all this stuff, and we don't quite, they're all wrapped up in these winter clothes, so you don't quite see what they look like and everything, and that's rather mysterious and whatnot. And then, well, you get a little, I don't know, cosmic looking spinning of time to show you that, you know, millions of years later. And so Sarah and the Doctor arrive in that quarry or what have you, and they don't, even though there's alarms going off, they seem to be and finally Sarah figures it out, says, "Holy crap, we better get out of here," and the explosives go off, and they get buried and all that, and the Doctor fares a little better than Sarah did. They have to dig her out, and lo and behold, there's this fossilized hand sitting there, which you would assume is some sort of like piece of art or statue or what have you. It's missing a finger, but it's got this alien ring on it and all that, and Sarah's clinging to it, and they can't even get it out of her hand, but they take her to the hospital anyway, because, you know, she needs to go to the hospital. And but it turns out they determine its age, and while it couldn't be a statue because humans didn't even exist at that time point, and so thus the mystery and all this. And so the Doctor's trying to figure that out. Meanwhile, Sarah once again has been hypnotized or mesmerized, whatever. She's been taken over by this artifact. And of course, the artifact is what? Well, it's what remains of the alien criminal Eldrad that was executed. And just as the guy had warned that it wouldn't be complete, it wasn't. And now Eldrad returning to life is possible through Sarah. This is the plot all the way through. Now, technically, I suppose you could count this as a unit adventure, but only so briefly, as they are in, for then, contemporary times, as you know, they say it's in the 70s and all that. And the Doctor uses his unit connections to, you know, to get through red tape and whatnot, and to have some amount of authority over whatever's going on here. And so there's that. But that's it, you know. And there's characters there who could have been the Brigadier that they could have written in, but they, you know, that was gone. And this is the last gasp of all of that. So basically the creature needs radiation, and it can absorb it. And Sarah, under its possession, moves on, and it goes on. Who has seen the light of Eldrad, you know, follows in Eldrad. So she blasts the pathology doctor at the hospital with this. So now he too comes under the sway of Eldrad, although the doctor is unaware of this for a while, as he accompanies the doctor trying to figure out what's going on with Sarah. She goes, of course, to a nuclear reactor. Well, where do you want some radiation? Well, you'll get it there. So she's headed for she just basically knocks people out. And eventually this poor pathology doctor, overwhelmed by the power of Eldrad, attacks the doctor. I'm not exactly, I guess because the Eldrad saw the doctor as a threat coming to stop Sarah from what she's doing, and that's why. But ultimately, he falls to his death in an attempt to attack the doctor, and the doctor's like, what the hell was that? So he gets to Sarah. She normally would certainly be dead, but Eldrad absorbs the radiation, and so she's unharmed in this chamber. And they figure, well, this was must have been some kind of weird terrorist attack or whatnot. And the doctor takes over and says, no, let me handle this. And he's trying to figure it out. Of course, once again, he hypnotizes Sarah to find out what happened. And it's still a bit of a mystery, but he understands some kind of intelligence is at work here, and took over her mind and made use of her to get this hand in there. And of course, what's creepy? Yeah, the hand. Well, we've seen that. What is it? The Munsters or Addams Family? I forget which. The creeping hand. And then there's plenty of B movies where the same thing happens. So yeah, they do all right with it. It's the old tricks, and all that. But it works. And one of the workers at the plant there, he's to clean up at her, and he finds the ring, and it's not Green Lantern. And then it affects him. This thing starts all over again, and he ends up finally delivering the hand and everything deep into the reactor core, and ends up being vaporized as the regeneration process takes place. And Eldrad is once again alive and in full form. However, Eldrad doesn't look like himself. He looks like herself. Now, this is back in the days when you didn't worry about gender politics and identity politics and all that nonsense. It just flows through the story. Why does Eldrad look like a woman? Because the first person Eldrad comes into contact with is Sarah. So it begins to adapt, and its longest time is with her, not with even though this man ends up bringing the hand in there, it was much longer with her. And it starts to base what its appearance will be on that, and it influences the development of this new body that Eldrad is trying to form for himself. And so Eldrad looks like a woman, and so it seems that they handled more care than the current Doctor Who did with this idea of suddenly transforming into the opposite sex. And it's, of course, it's brief for the Eldrad story, but here the character is treated far more credibly and with more respect in the ordeal, if you will. Some of the ideas about the Doctor regenerating into a woman, I would have thought that this could have been an avenue for, like, the Doctor's regeneration wasn't going well, and somebody might have thought he needed a blood transfusion or something like that, and one of the female companions offers to do so, and then that influences the regeneration. But still, it's probably best to say that since the regeneration is just going on and on and on, sooner or later, female DNA is in you somewhere, because everybody has a mommy and daddy. Unless, the Doctor doesn't now because of the weird, that's just nonsense. It stands to reason sooner or later something like that can happen. So that's probably a better way to go about it. Although it is interesting if you look back at Capaldi's last, second to last, I guess, where Bill leans down to give him a goodbye kiss while he's seemingly dead on the floor, and her tear falls down, and now she's been transformed into the magical water goddess or whatever, and it glows onto his forehead, and he's always, did her female DNA influence his regeneration? Could have said something like that. Nah, in one ear and out the other with the new crew, so. But anyway, no. It's probably better overall to just say, it happens. But there again, by following that pathway, you would be saying, well, it's probably a rare occurrence and all that. So anyway, this is what happens to Eldrad. Now, some people say this establishes it that it's possible. No, it establishes it for Eldrad. The idea that his appearance changes at the end. He does get back to his male form on his home planet. And, Sarah's surprised, and the doctor seems surprised, and the doctor says, oh, come on, as a Time Lord, you know the aspects of regeneration. So, meaning you change form, you're not going to look the same and all that. So, yeah, that's what happened. Plus, it's the doctor who explains to Sarah how this happened anyway. So, but anyway, yeah, Eldrad reforms. Eldrad seems, it does some rather amazing things with the power to absorb energy and all that. Says he wants to return initially through time travel. When she discovers that the doctor is Time Lord, says, I want to go back before all this happened and to stop this from ever happening to me. And the doctor says, no, I can't do that. He says, but I will take you home. So, all right, I'll take that part of the deal. So they go, and Eldrad, there's a bunch of booby traps for Eldrad. They go through this obstacle course to get there. And ultimately, the regeneration process, in order to save Eldrad gets poisoned by one of the traps. And none of the traps affect them because they're carbon-based, not silicon-based creatures. And Eldrad ultimately regenerates, and then there's a tape left behind by his enemies to inform him that, okay, if you survive this long, so what? Everything's gone. Your actions destroyed our world, and there's nothing left, and nobody wanted to be your subject anymore. So there's supposed to be these race banks left behind that Eldrad could activate and recreate his race, but they've all been destroyed. And so now he's left with absolutely nothing. And it's like, well, that's a just sentence. And the doctor says, yeah, I'm not. And then he says, well, I'll just go rule the earth. And the doctor says, no, you're not going back. And they struggle for it. Now, Eldrad could come back. I don't know if Big Finish has already done this. Haven't seen. Of course, he hasn't returned in any of the new shows or anything like that. But the doctor tosses the ring to, stop him from, capturing him and Sarah or doing them harm. And he falls over into a seemingly bottomless pit. Well, but considering how hard it is to kill that guy, and in fact, if he does recapture his ring, this is a villain who could return. So he's not dead yet. But the doctor figures I'm not going down there. So they hop back to the TARDIS and back on their way. And then suddenly he gets the call from Gallifrey, which will set up the next story. And oddly enough, this episode and the previous one is kind of like should have been tacked on to the end of the last season, because it really feels like that. Whereas going into the next adventure for the Doctor actually works better as a premiere episode for a new season, because it is a new direction and whatnot. But at least here, Sarah gets to see the new control room. Yeah, that's kind of nice. But at this point, the Doctor says, I can't take Sarah to Gallifrey. I've got to take her home. And that's that. And Sarah at this point is mad at him for everything that's happened. And she says, I quit. I want out. I want to go home. And of course, she just meant it. And she was mad and all that. She was really bluffing. But turns out she's got to go. And it's all sad. Now, why would the Doctor do this after everything they'd been through? Does he really see Gallifrey as more dangerous than anything else that he's faced? And it seems highly unlikely. I mean, they faced the Daleks, for God's sakes. I mean, it's this. Of course, that really wasn't by his choice, but nevertheless. But Sarah's attitude, and it's on demonstration here, where she takes risks and she feels somewhat invincible because of the Doctor's presence when she clearly isn't. And there's quite a few times where the Doctor's saying, "Stay here," and she just won't do it. She follows him anyway. And it's one of those things where I don't know if it was intended as part of this, but it's how I see it now, that he has this kind of troubled look on his face while she's hanging around, and he says, he wants her around, but he can't. And if it goes any further, he's going to get her killed. And so he has to let her go. And I know there wasn't romantic stories in the original, but I always thought that there is something there. They actually made quite the cute couple. Just on appearances, you would think, no way, she could do way better than that crazy looking guy. But it worked. And so it was doubly sad when she had to go. It's more sad for me because I really liked Sarah, my young boy taken with her. At the time and stuff. Looking back, I can see where people mean about Joe Grant's departure. It's very simple and slight almost, and yet it's powerfully sad how it works and how sorry you feel for the doctor that he's all alone. But this was a sad moment and how she goes, and she never comes back. Not really. We see her again in The Five Doctors. As far as the Sarah Jane adventures, it was very childlike. I wasn't really up on the idea she gets canine and all that, and even though that's the kind of thing she would have liked, so I guess I understand it, but wasn't too keen on any of that stuff. So yeah, Five Doctors, she shows up. It's too bad Tom Baker couldn't have done that. That would have been kind of interesting, whether or not they would have given any kind of nod to it. Maybe she would have paired up with him for that one, and that would have been really nice. And it's really sad that they didn't reunite for some Big Finish stories. Yeah, that really grinds my gears. It didn't happen. But that's about it. Of course, we do get her back for New Who, and that is, I think, a very powerful scene where she's talking to the 10th Doctor, and it's like, I waited for you. And that's the thing, the Doctor kind of ruined her for any other man she would have met. Her heart belonged to the Doctor, and I think there's no other way to conclude that story. And that was that. So it's a sad way to go, but it is what it is. And of course, you got to know, why couldn't the Doctor visit? Well, for the reasons that he does it all the time. Sometimes people say it's like the Peter Pan thing. Well, they're all going to get too old and he won't be able to relate. But the thing of it is that he realizes his recklessness. Now, this is true of every companion that he's with, but in a way, he really did. He loved Sarah, and he couldn't keep doing that, and he had to let her go. Of course, he's like, hey, doesn't she have a say-so in the matter? But the idea if she would have died on one of those adventures, would have destroyed him. So it's a sad ending there, but it always is with companions going, but more so because a lot of ways Sarah Jane Smith was the quintessential Doctor Who companion, and that's a tough act to follow. And they do follow in a very clever way, and by making someone who's utterly different. And that's usually the best way to handle this sort of thing. And it does work. All right. So, yeah, it was a tough one to go. There are some interesting elements here, of course, with Eldrad and all that. And it is a character who could return later. Just a tough one to get through. And so it is a great episode. In a lot of ways, it's very simplistic. It's basically a monster episode and that sort of thing, but it's a good one. And because I don't know how you don't like Sarah Jane if you're sitting through classic Doctor Who episodes, and this one is a tough one because she's not really going to come back. There's some guest starring and other specials and whatnot, but other than that, that's the end of the road for Sarah Jane Smith. Thank you for watching and listening. Say, why not like and subscribe, and check out that link description below. That'll take you to my mini stores that have plenty of goodies for you. Most notably, my comic book Night Night. Oh yes, based on the audio plays of the same name from my podcast, The Mr Nailsin Show on RadioMisfits.com. And of course, you can watch videos like this on BitChute.